Hey everyone, it's Debbie, and I'm doing a new podcast to bring you information on how you can improve your ability as an athlete, an aging athlete, as I am, how you can improve your performance and really look at, I have just said chia seeds and they're all over me, how you can improve your ability to burn fat and performance and longevity. Testing and not guessing is what I like to talk about. As a nutritional therapy practitioner, FDN practitioner, and a personal trainer and health coach, metabolic efficiency coach for, 25 plus years. I've been doing this somehow. I'm 50 now, 50. I got to get comfortable saying that. And the goal of this podcast, this new season, 2022, is to talk about different strategies that you can implement, experiment, and figure out what works for you, as we're all totally unique individuals, to figure out what foods to eat, how to fast, when not to fast, how to time your carbohydrate intake, and figure out how to train right as we age. We shouldn't do so much chronic cardio. We might feel better doing less cardio, more intervals, more strength training, and more. So let's dive into this podcast with one of the co-founders of Veri, a new continuous glucose monitor testing app. And we've talked to NutriSense, and we actually have another podcast with them soon. And I really want to kind of find out what's the difference of these different apps, how we can really use that data to figure out what foods are good for me and what foods work best for my recovery from workouts, and maybe tie it all together with a Whoop or Oura ring to figure out, all right, how's my fueling, training, and performing? Work on being more intuitive, getting that data to figure out, all right, N=1 experiment. Let's track, test, and see what we need to adjust, keep doing, or course correct. So let me bring on Anttoni. See you in a bit. All right, guys, I have Anttoni here, one of the co-founders of the CGM company Veri, and we're going to dive deep into the science behind it, the why, how to use it, and all the benefits we can get as an athlete, especially talking about the endurance athlete and the low carb athlete, because less is more sometimes. Figure out what to eat, not so low carbs, not all carbs are evil. What foods could be healthy foods that could be reactive to you? So testing and not guessing, as a health detective that I am nowadays, is kind of what I love to share these stories with you and products. So thanks for coming on the show and diving deep into the science behind all this CGM, continuous glucose monitors.
Thank you, Debbie. I'm glad to be here. I'm happy that we got the time to do this.
Yeah. So talk about what is, the short name is Veri, but why did you guys all come up with another CGM company? There's other competitors out there. So it's a growing field, but what is the purpose of your company and what sets you apart from other platforms?
Yeah, we started working on Veri back in 2019. So it's quite a long time ago already. We have had our own issues with health, especially in like with nutrition and our metabolic health. My co-founder has struggled with ulcerative colitis like growing up. I've had as well like a lot of weight management issues in the past, and because of that, like I feel that I'm like somewhat like awakened to some like higher level of existence when it comes to nutrition and how we get quite a lot of things wrong when we talk about nutrition and so on. And it's kind of like our journey to what we are doing. And what sets us apart, I think there's a lot. You're right. There's a lot of companies that have come into the space, and some people go more towards the athlete use case. Some people go more towards kind of like the optimizer use case. I think where we want to really shine is the nutrition space and really helping people effortlessly understand and with like very, very short feedback loops, understand what to eat, how to be as metabolically healthy as possible.
And I feel like as I get older, and we've done this podcast on and off over 10 years, that it's more about not just performance gains for the athlete, but excuse me, the long-term longevity, I talk about this every show, I think. Who are you going to be your future self 10, 20, 30 years from now? Especially my parents turned 80 this year, watching them just what their body does and health issues that happen as a result of our choices, what we make at this age now. So I think so many athletes think they are invincible, and that because they're fit and they can do these endurance events or whatever sport they're in, that they can eat whatever they want, and they don't think of the long-term effects, that damage they're doing at a cellular level at this time now. So how can a continuous glucose monitor help us, as I say, burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance, but more so the longevity side, performance in our future self?
Yeah, really good question. I think the use cases are there's a lot of use cases, obviously. As you said, as you highlighted earlier, like not all carbs are bad, and it's really hard to perform at a high level if you have no carbs, I think it's just about distinguishing what carbs are causing you unnecessary glucose spikes that are then, having a prolonged impact, so to say, to your metabolic health, right? So it's not foreign that you would see athletes that are on like pre-diabetic levels being like shredded and just kind of like, doing ultra marathons here and there, right? So there definitely exists this almost like a category of athletes who are performing really, really well, but they might be having like pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic glucose levels, and because of that have really, really elevated insulin levels. When then the kind of like their sports career ends, or they don't necessarily like do anymore that kind of like competitive sports, you'll see quickly, or you could quickly see like weight gain and such things, because they are so insulin resistant.
Mm-hmm. So with that, few thoughts is that often there's fit and fat athletes, no offense, people, but there's so many athletes. I know I started Ironmans in 2001 and started my adrenal exhaustion in 2013. And so over those years, being in the industry and being a coach and observing different types of people and sizes and their health, there are a lot of athletes that are, say, doing an Ironman and they're still over fat. They do a marathon, they don't lose weight. So that's why I think we started this podcast. It used to be called Fit, Fat, Fast 10 years ago, that to eat fat, to burn fat, and teaching people way before people knew what we're talking about. Keto wasn't a word back then, but, saying metabolic efficiency. And I think a lot of athletes are not realizing that there are certain foods that are going to improve their health. And we're talking more metabolic health. So for an athlete or non-athlete, what is metabolic health mean for you guys when you're trying to help that category?
Yeah. So metabolic health is basically, a set of processes where your energy intake is as efficiently as possible turning into energy, and there isn't like any blockages, so to say, right? This term surfaced early 2019 when a group of researchers in University of North Carolina showed that 88% of the US population is considered metabolically unhealthy by objective criteria. So, this is 288 million people in the United States alone, right?
Wow.
So this is the 5 metrics. So the study was basically on 8.7 thousand people, and it seeks to look for optimal levels in 5 different parameters to justify good metabolic health or metabolic health: blood glucose, triglycerides, HDL cholesterol, blood pressure, and waist circumference. So basically, all of the people had like one of these, or not all of the people, 88% of the people had one of these south. So this is basically what metabolic health means: having kind of like having ideal or optimal levels in these 5 different objective criteria, so that the metabolic processes, so to say, function correctly, right? And so on.
So the word you didn't mention was insulin. Insulin and insulin resistance. And that seems, according to Dr. Ben Bickman, and a lot more people are speaking, it's not just glucose. Ideally, you want to know what our insulin's doing. And I find it's crazy when I do functional lab assessments for clients now as a health detective. No one is getting their insulin tested when they go see the doctor. They're just doing your fasted glucose and A1C, which is the 90-day range. And now they're not even doing inflammatory markers. So kind of recap, what are the top labs? Are you familiar with the top labs people should get for testing inflammation in their body to contributes to metabolic health imbalances?
You hit the nail in the head there really, really well, right? So for us, like right now, we're still in just measuring glucose, but we're planning to expand to other biomarkers as well this year. So definitely insulin is huge. Like fasting insulin especially is a great marker for us to understand, because as you said, glucose is a proxy of insulin, and insulin is like kind of like the main victim, so to say, or like one of the biggest victims, so to say. You know, like the thing, what we are translating as poor metabolic health is actually you having elevated levels of insulin, like constant, like chronic elevated levels of insulin, because you are basically promoting fat storage in your body when your insulin levels are elevated. So and basically, you know, blocking energy, blocking blocking ATP to enter like those certain like parts of your body, and that, you know, like causing different kind of complications. But those insulin is really big. Inflammation markers, so like C-reactive protein, really big as well. And such metrics are triglycerides as well. You know, HDL, ADL, but especially like the small particle LDL, really big as well. So these are some of the metrics that we're really interested as well in showing and giving people more visibility into. Yeah.
So I think it's good to get that information, but then, you know, it says at this time we can't test insulin, but it sounds like I've heard that's going to come in the future when people can figure that out. So we can self-test our glucose. So instead of pricking our finger multiple times a day, we can do a continuous glucose monitor, and they're usually good around 14 days. And talk about the benefits of knowing what your glucose is over 24 hours versus just a snapshot of like glucose testing kit.
When you think when you think about it, like the glucose testing kit doesn't really like tell you that much. It's just one point, a single time point or like measurement point, and that can hold like a lot of noise, so to say, that has impacted that level at the time, right? So there's a lot of or we are already seeing in our own data with our customers and our users that poor sleep has a negative impact to glucose levels. If you just had an exercise, that has usually a positive effect. If you just had a brisk walk to the doctor's office, you know, you might have had way lower glucose levels that you would like without taking that part of the day in account you would have had, right? So there's like all of these lifestyle habits that are having a huge impact to that one single metric, and that's why it might be really loaded with misinformation, so to say, about the current situation. So a continuous glucose monitor measures your glucose every 5 minutes. Every 5 minutes you get a measurement basically of your glucose, and with products like Veri, with products like what we've created, we are able to as well like bring in all of these other like lifestyle habits, so to say, into the mix of we can see if you've had an exercise, we can see how much you've slept the previous night, and connect all of these like lifestyle driven data points in as well, and give you a better understanding of how are your current lifestyle habits having an impact to your metabolic health, and more specifically your glucose levels. So that's what Veri does, and that's why it's so important that we really understand, and I've used the term of codify our environment, so we really understand what is the state of our metabolic health and how we can as well, with those with those right choices, and with especially like with food choices, but as well with exercise and with sleep choices, have an impact to the state of our metabolic health at a given time, right?
Yeah. So I don't know, 8 years ago, I created what I called the holistic method to transform the whole you from the inside out, to burn fat, improve health and performance. But it was not just as a personal trainer in my early career. I was coaching athletes and training people of all ages, and just exercise wasn't enough. And you can't out exercise a bad diet, but then it's stress management. And I wrote a book called Life is Not a Race, It is a Journey, because stress, constant stress inside and out, will overfill that beaker of stress. And it's amazing how my CGM will react to traffic, or like I'm type of person that if I'm slightly late to something, I freak out, like get stressed because I hate being late. And those type of personality habits, that if you're not just organized or something, how you get anxious and how that will show in your glucose. I've learned a nutritional therapy practitioner program I took. Every stress response is a blood sugar response. So it's not just what you eat. Also, I'll throw in there that even keto type of labeled foods, low carb foods, will still spike my glucose up, certain foods, even if they're healthy. And this is why I'm a big advocate for all my clients. Get a CGM for 90 days at least, and let's learn about how food responds to your body. So with that, talk about how we can test our glucose to help us figure out what to eat. Because I always talk about what to eat, how to eat, when, and why.
Love that.
And all that
I love that
stuff. Because it's not just what you eat, but if you can't even digest it, it's an issue. And if you're eating when you're stressed and all that. So how can we use this to figure out what to eat and when?
Yeah. So what we've the answer is with Veri, right? But maybe I'll talk a bit about the product, so you'll catch the drift. But so glucose itself is an interesting metric, right? Like it's a very interesting metric, but just seeing your glucose, it's very hard to kind of like connect the dots between, what did I eat? What kind of like, what did I eat? Was it a restaurant, or did I cook something myself? What ingredients it had, like what composition of macros and micros and whatnot, right? So that's the first piece of the puzzle, right? Like everyone has a pretty like unique set of responses to different meals, right? Why I say pretty is because there are, like, when you look at the glycemic index table, you react like somewhat similarly, but there are like big surprises, so to say, in terms of like someone might react like really dramatically to a banana when someone might react really dramatically to a cookie, and then vice versa. And even to the extent that one of the kind of like the hallmark studies of the space done in King's College in the UK looked at the identical twins, and that identical twins had exact opposite reactions to this banana cookie experiment. And the main reason for that is basically because their microbiome is very different. So their environment has changed since they're kind of like born and don't anymore like live in the same household. They have a really different set of bacteria, and hence they have then like very different reactions to different foods, right? But these all are things that you're seeing in your glucose levels, right? This is as well like why we got really interested about the space, because we were really interested in understanding our microbiome as well. But that's a side point here. But really understanding what we eat happens like on the Veri app. So you basically take an image of your food and you really quickly type in like what you're having. It automatically populates you the tags of what's on your plate, and then you just wait. You wait for 2.5 hours and you scan the sensor, and you'll see how your body responds to that set of ingredients prepared that way at that given time, taking into consideration the fact that have you just exercised, or have you exercised 4 days ago, how, depleted your glycogen stores are, so to say, how much you've slept for the past week, but especially last night, and what time of the day it is. Is it in the morning? Is it in the like late at night, as you're binge eating and watching Netflix, or so on, right? So we try and bring all of this data into one really simple and easy to use platform and interface where people can then really understand and codify their environment to make better decisions.
Yeah, so because I think a lot of athletes will work out, say they'll do a fasted workout in the morning and they'll see their glucose go up, or I find a lot of people, including myself, middle of the night, their glucose go up. So what are some red flags when we have this sudden spike in our glucose when it's not necessarily what we ate, or, what else could it be?
Yeah. Well, stress is one, as you said. Yeah. Stress is one. I've had nerve-wracking meetings and my glucose is shot off the roof, but there obviously as well, it's a good way to show that the product works when you see that. So that's been great. A lot of athletes will see very dramatic glucose spikes from strength training, for example, or just like anaerobic exercise, which is totally normal. You're basically summoning more energy in those strenuous workouts, and that's why your glucose is spiking. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that you are. It's very a natural process when you think about it. Human body is very complicated, but very simple sometimes. It's two modes almost. We either flee or relax, and your glucose kind of follows that. So, yeah.
So I found one thing I found interesting applying nutritional therapy and other things I've learned over the years as a practitioner is that when it spikes around 1 to 2 a.m. in Chinese medicine, that means liver time. So if you test a GI map, it's kind of interesting. You're talking about your microbiome balance, imbalances, dysbiosis, but also looking at parasite pathogens, candida, different gut infections, having these bad guys living inside of you that can be more active. Some are active at nighttime. Mm-hmm. And so your liver's also working harder. Detoxification happens. I would say the housekeeping service comes to us while we're sleeping. And in Chinese medicine, that 1 to 2, if you look at the clockwork of what the organs do in Chinese medicine, it's really interesting. And then correlating that with a spike that's consistent in the middle of the night and how that could be my theory of my liver's working and doing its job, trying to get rid of some bad guys and working on the wash and rinse and elimination process.
Haven't looked into that much. No, that's super interesting.
Yeah. Look at the Chinese medicine clock. I think it's organ clock or something like that, what it's called, but it's pretty cool. Okay. So glucose, fasted morning workouts. Now, when we're doing a higher intensity workout, it'd be interesting how we can use this data to figure out carb or food timing, if we can eat best to eat before or after, and how we want to have that glucose. It might go up, as you said, doing a higher intensity exercise, that we want it to see come back down if it's more red flag if it stays up for a long period of time, mm-hmm. right? So mm-hmm. if we can wonder if there's any way kind of use this data to figure out our timing, eating and exercise and carb timing. Have you ever experimented with that? Or should we start a new study?
Yeah, no, in a lot of these things, the jury is still out. We're working on still in regards in a lot of these things and trying to find these different connections between glucose and training, especially, but everything overall. So everything is very early stage. I think what a lot of people have been able to show and prove is that there's inner variability. There are certain set of genetic and epigenetic functions that have an impact to the way that we react to glucose, and that glucose, like high glucose is obviously, and high levels of insulin is obviously really, really bad. And like fluctuation as well is something that should be avoided. That I think that the modern food environment is causing a lot. You know, we eat multiple times a day, and we're basically just like constantly pumping up, or kind of like ruining the engine of like the kind of like homeostasis and the engine of glucose and insulin, right? Which can be considered, or it's safe to say that it can be considered like harmful in the long term. But yeah, personally, like from like NS1 and from like my personal like experiment, so to say, I've found that it's not a secret, but depending on the workouts, you would want to eat like before or after, you know, that given workout. So if I have like a strength training workout in the morning, I'll definitely like eat before that. But when then like more of a like an endurance type of thing, I would actually like eat after that and do a faster workout instead, just to improve as well, you know, like this like alternative engine that, you know, you are very familiar with, like, you know, really like producing and moving with the kind of like the on like, well, reaching a state of ketosis and kind of like training this other alternative engine, so to say, of energy production. But I think with in regards of how can we see and what can we see with glucose monitors in like tanking, it's still like very early stage to really show anything there.
Well, I don't think anyone would ever have an answer because it's n=1. I just mean it's self-experimentation, how we can do this for ourselves. And it's like one of those things that no one will ever have or should be able to have an answer, because female athletes different than male athlete, and then every female is different, everyone's different. But just how much we can use this data and connect it with, say, your aura scores or whoop scores, and lab testing as your GI map or Genova 3-day stool test, whatever you want to do, and look at genetics. And that's kind of what we do as personalized nutrition programs, put all this together for people to figure it out. But I just think it'd be kind of interesting as a health coach to figure out, all right, like here's when they work out, they eat before, here's what happens after, how was that workout? And then somehow tag it on there when they enter their workouts, and what type of workout, of course, and heart rate and intensity. There's so many factors. So that's why I don't think it's really an answer you guys will have, but it's something it'd be good for people to experiment, because it is a CGM is showing our unique individuality, and our needs are going to be different for another athlete, but we can use this to test on ourselves instead of just guessing. All right, I think I feel better, but that's just a thought. So anything else?
What I have done is that it was interesting to see when I was getting started with the CGMs, and I always like did I always did like a morning workouts, and I have always like asked myself, like, why am I so especially like energetic in the morning, right? And it was interesting to see in my glucose levels in the morning, because I would have like a cortisol, like an adrenaline spike, which, you know, is like a normal process of how we wake up, and you really see that in your glucose levels. So your glucose levels go up. So I would almost like use, you know, that that produced energy, so to say, that was like distributed now to me. I would use that to kind of like power my workouts in the morning. So even though I hadn't eaten anything, I always felt, you know, amazing in the morning working out, even doing like strenuous workouts, when a lot of my friends, you know, and a lot of like my training buddies could never have done it. You know, they were like, I definitely have to eat when I wake up. And this is probably like individual and personal, and might be as well like mental. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have more energy like distributed, but, you know, you just kind of like believe that you do, and that makes you do incredible things. So that's just my like NS1 thing that, you know, helped me as well a lot in working out in the morning, so to say.
Well, I think I've really found a difference when I'm doing a long run. Say Sundays is my typical long run day, Saturdays is a long bike day, and I can tolerate more carbohydrates post workout and not see any spike in my glucose compared to having it just in normal, non-athletic time period. I'll see a spike in a lot of foods, but if I put some more carby thing after workout when I'm hungry and have some protein, it doesn't spike. It's crazy. So I think that's kind of what works with my body. I found like, all right, I can time when I'm going to go on my little more carbs, and kind of go back with what we're talking about when you're eating is that intermittent fasting and that time restricted feeding window. If we kind of have that, maybe a larger window for female athletes and athletes that are, maybe doing more strength training and harder workouts. So when they're eating, they're able to figure out what macronutrient ratios of foods to eat to keep it balanced. But question is, what is ideal? Do we want to have spikes and have kind of resiliency, or is it better just have it steady, keep between 70 and 90, don't go over 100? What do you think is healthy for improving our metabolic health?
Yeah. This is a really good question, and like the more stable, the better, right? Like that's something that can be said. In terms of like the ranges, right? So what we suggest for like in terms of like normal ranges is anywhere from like 70 to 140. That would be considered normal. Outside of that, then it's we might it's like outside of normal ranges. But in very often, like in multiple cases, we in like optimal levels, we try and hit like somewhere between like 70 to 110, 120. So that's, something that like an athlete, for example, would kind of like expect having on a day-to-day basis, like staying approximately like 90% inside of the range, because you'll have those spikes, especially if you do like strenuous workouts, like anaerobic workout, you'll have those spikes, and that's like considered totally normal. And some meals will spike, and that's like normal. It's not you'll make mistakes. Let's put it this way. So that's what we can kind of like consider normal. Like that's something that you would consider like throughout the day. Then like a mean post meal glucose spike that is ranging from 90 to 150 is considered normal. Like out of that, then again. But like optimally, you would aim for somewhere around like 120 to 130, around like that area, and so on. So these are the things that I can kind of like say that are considered normal versus optimal,
for your
and
users.
what we've seen as well. Yeah, for our users, this is something that we've seen, and like in multiple studies as well. Like these are numbers that are kind of like average. The normal ranges are from multiple studies showing that, hey, this seems to be the kind of like the point where you're considered like pre-diabetic or diabetic, and the optimal ranges are then numbers that we've kind of like seen in like non-diabetic use cases, and are kind of like advocating to our users of where to be in.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to figure out what is their average, and I find for male and female, but especially females, to do a 30-day, so they're cycling females that have a menstrual cycle, that they need to see the hormone fluctuations. Because if you look at, we're not about just staying in keto, we're fluctuations. You want to be metabolically flexible and going lower carbs, say 5 days a week, and then one day just do whatever, and then one day do a higher carb day, or kind of alternate, like you're doing a dinner OMAD kind of meal to meal thing on your rest day, and then maybe you're doing more intermittent fasting weekdays, and one day just don't even worry about it. So you want to be in and out of a higher carb and then lower carb. But the challenge is, I find a lot of people, that's why I'm kind of talking about this in the podcast, they're telling other podcasts and experts, of course, their metabolic health guidelines for getting people healthy. For the non-athletes, about 50 grams of carbs a day. Even Dr. Westman has everyone do 20 grams. But those are people that are metabolically unhealthy and obese, and they have those comorbidities that they're struggling. Not the guidelines that we should be listening to as athlete. As Ben Greenfield says, some people can do 100 to 200 grams a day and still be low carb for an athlete. So tying that in with you guys, the CGM monitor will be able to tell people, as I just interviewed Rob Wolf about carb tolerance as well, to testing how many carbs can I take and which carbohydrate foods don't spike the glucose. So really dialing in what foods you react to in a negative way and what foods really are beneficial to avoid those spikes up high and low. Like you're saying, you don't want to have a lot of spikes.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not all carbs are bad, and like for athletes and especially for athletes to really like be able to have and enjoy those workouts, you'll need to have carbs. And when you listen to the kind of like the regular or kind of like the keto, more kind of like general advice, like keto podcast, you'll find like very, very low number of carbohydrates, but you'll kind of like need to adjust that to your own expenditure, so to say. So definitely here as well. I think CGMs are such a genius way of really understanding that. What carbs can you have and eat without having metabolically unhealthy responses to those forms of carbohydrates?
Yeah, and some people may need to go super low carb and just do like broccoli and cauliflower type of cruciferous vegetables, and then have lots more protein and healthy fats. But that's why I love, what I do. When I'm working on nutrition protocols for people, is look at their ancestry background, look at their genetics. Like I'm highly carb sensitive on my genetic report, and my microbiome has been a mess in the past, even though I do all the right things. But that's what I, try to strive to, or tell people to strive to be healthy from the inside out, and doing a CGM test to figure out what foods are going to work for me. Because like Rob Wolf even says, it might be, I forget what his things like black beans or lentils or something, or versus rice. His wife could do something and it didn't do anything. And that food that did nothing to her glucose would totally spike his glucose. So I think it's not thinking that everyone's the same, that everyone is unique. And this really shows that when you test foods in your own body, you can figure out what foods work best. Right. Yeah. And it might change, but it's leaky gut and what food's been tagged as enemies in your body, I think would be impacted in raising your glucose, because those are a threat. And so they're going to be an additional source of stress that will spike your glucose. Like even stevia, for some reason, was spiking my glucose up, even though it isn't anything, but it is a sugar raises my glucose up for me. But most people probably don't have that. But so anyways, I'm babbling, but I just think there's so much information you can get from this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting about stevia. Have you looked into it of what might be the cause?
Well, I did a Vibrant Wellness Food Zoomer panel, which we did a podcast on my results. And when you have food sensitivity tests, as you probably know, when you have, it just shows that you have a leaky gut, and those foods are what escaped out of the protective castle and it escaped into your bloodstream, into the body. So they're tagged as enemies, as I said. So stevia wasn't on my test, but I assume one of those foods, if it was tested on the food sensitivity test, would show that stevia was on it. But I just assume it would be. So I take it out for 90 days and reintroduce it. And that's what a CGM was great for. Instead of spending another $400 on a food test, I can do a CGM test and then track it. And then like your program, you can tag and mark what you had or make notes of things too. I think it's important to add in things going on in your body.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. Like, I've personally had, and I've seen a lot of people have sometimes having a response to kind of like artificial sweeteners and sweeteners, and sometimes they don't. And it actually might be something about the brain. You're kind of like sweet. So you're still, your body is kind of like producing the same responses and reacting the same way. So you're actually like then, producing glucose and insulin and the regular process, but it's still there. Jury is out again here, but there's some showing of this, and yes.
So the other thing is for women, going back to, just wrote a note of this, for women to use a CGM and track their menstrual cycle on there somehow. So they know, because if you listen to keto and carbs for women, they have 2 phases in their cycle, one to do lower carb, more ketosis, and fast more the first half of their cycle, second half, when they ovulate, changes that they can have a little more carbs for those 2 days. And then the last week before their cycle, they can have more carbs. So it'd be kind of another experiment for women to do that are listening. Use your glucose monitor so you can see, okay, how do these carbs affect my glucose levels? Does it stay level? Is my body like that? Instead of trying to do, because I'm finding, again, I'm going off on this conversation of CGM, I guess, today, but the fasting for athletes, there's so much extreme fasting for athletes. I think they're doing too much and they're doing too low of carbs, and just some people might be okay on just protein and fat and doing really minimal carbohydrates, and other athletes and female athletes will need some more. So I think using this information, using the Veri app and tracking everything would be the easiest way to really figure out what's working for me to be my best self.
Yeah, definitely. No, interesting stuff as well in terms of like menstrual cycle and how your blood sugar as well like behaves during those times, because like you in different phases you'll have a lot more like cortisol production, and you'll be a lot more like reactive to certain foods, right? So we've actually internally worked on a tool, basically it's like a cycle tracker, and as well like kind of like a diary of looking at your glucose levels and looking at the foods that you eat. And there's a lot of potential there as well, like seeing how in certain like phases of your cycle you tend to eat different things, and you tend to kind of like have different like desires to certain things that like you wouldn't necessarily like on other parts, and how those then are affecting your glucose level. So it's a big opportunity to build really something very, very powerful in the femtech scene as well. So
there is one coming out, but not CGM, so you can use it kind of example, but it's called wild.ai, and it's based on Dr. Stacy Sims and athletes and menstrual cycle tracking. So they do have one in beta testing.
I've heard about
it. Putting that with CGM, and I mean, I know Heads Up Health tries to do this, but you have to have access to everyone's platform to connect all the data, because I always want all-in-one device, especially when I'm coaching people, I'll get your training peaks, get your Aura ring or your Whoop band, and then your CGM, and then we track your food, my fitness pal. It's like, okay, I can't handle that myself. And then just like have one place to put all that data and track it is what we need.
Yeah. I've heard this often.
Yeah. So I'm glad you guys are kind of putting in what I call the holistic method, the sleep and the steps, and getting, your digestion, gut health, and being able to track all that, the symptoms. So you're on the right direction. Okay. So let me get to, because I'm blabbing a lot today because I love this topic. So sorry, people have to listen to me, but what questions we had from some of the listeners and my low carb athlete Instagram, Facebook peeps on using the right carbs. How can we use this to figure out the right carbs and the right amount during exercise, pre, during, and post? What would you say? I think we kind of talked about that, but not having as much spikes, or having it come back down, or not too low and have it go below average, below normal.
I think like so looking at like pre-workout, I think there it's about really like getting your glucose levels to higher level, because you want to be like well tanked, so to say. So for example, when I was training for my first marathon, I was basically like tanking up to getting my glucose levels to around this is very like personal, right? But like for me, usually my average is somewhere around 75 to 85 or something like that. So I'll get them to 95, like almost like 100 range, like just a couple of days before the like the long run, and the run went well. So I would say that it had an impact. I feel that I didn't have to be like so dependent on any gels or like anything really after then, that kind of like, towards like the last parts of the race. But prior to that, I think that I was like pretty energetic. So I think just kind of like, pumping your glucose levels higher, like your average prior to the race, or prior to like any big event, and doing that with the right foods, doing that with the right foods that don't cause your glucose levels to spike like crazy, but just kind of like steadily go up, right? Like day in, day out.
Well, I just want to throw in there is that's where we talked about, testing those carbs that work best for you, like Rob Wolf's 7-day carb tolerance test with the CGM, because you don't want to try anything new race day. And so then, what foods work best for your unique body, and test that out beforehand, not on race day. Then you know how to time it and being a fat burner, but then have that backup carb tank ready to go when you're going to race pace, that you're going to be above the anaerobic threshold burning carbs. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Exactly. No, really good additions, and exactly that. I think the same thing applies like during the race or a workout, right? Like you don't want to, especially like race day, you don't want to eat anything that is like foreign to you, right? So when you've just worked on understanding the foods that are best for you, like during races and during workouts, you can kind of like rinse and repeat those, right? And have your glucose levels like constantly be elevated, and not like avoiding bonking. Post exercise is hard. Post exercise is then just kind of like about there. I don't really have anything to like anything to add. I think eating the things that you desire, so to say, especially after race, is like my biggest kind of like I believe in mental health so much that you don't always have to be religious about your glucose levels. So you can just go wild after a race, but generally, like in terms of like the regular workout and a training, I think that things that don't like cause you like to spike like crazy, but still get your energy levels like elevated and back to track is essential.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all due like through testing, as you said, like through testing and understanding what meals don't cause you to spike and so on. And what is like really great about like this like strenuous workouts, you've depleted all of your glycogen stores, so whatever you really eat, it won't spike your glucose. It's going to be really hard to spike your glucose after a really strenuous workout. So you can really eat anything that you really desire, and it will just kind of like go to your muscles and store in your liver, and your glucose will like hardly be affected. So indulge yourself after a big achievement.
But don't eat crap, because you are what you eat. So it's not a whole fast, because that's why athletes are still fat, because you think that mentality.
Yeah.
So it's that fine balance, like eat what you want, but also make sure it's from real food, not a bunch of gluten and other foods that are going to cause inflammation in your body when you want to have a more anti-inflammatory food. But that's where you would place more carbohydrates, because if you race and your heart rate is above your fat burning zone, then you will be able to tolerate more carbs and not spike the glucose, as I found even on a Sunday run, because my heart rate goes higher towards the end of a run. And so it's a good point. But all right, we've got a couple other questions here, last few minutes. So let's see, what sort of blood glucose levels are you looking for during training and racing? We haven't really tested that, but we would say, like, well, maybe we have to start our own study, because no one has this data.
Yeah, this is a hard question. Like it's most likely, you would want to keep them quite above the kind of like 70 80 range, like milligrams per deciliter. You'd want to keep them like elevated during race time, but to be like more accurate than that, it's hard. You just want to avoid bonking. And in some, like in some use cases, you can use CGM to avoid bonking, but it's still a bit, hard, so to say, because there's like a lag in blood sugar levels and blood sugar levels and glucose levels, like from a CGM. There's like a slight lag. So you, like everything that you see on the device, you'll see 15 minutes like after, this has kind of like occurred. So you can do predictions on what's happening and the trend and work against it. But it's hard to say kind of like an accurate number, so to say, where you should keep. But, keeping like in that like range, so to say, of not kind of like entering like a hypoglycemic levels under 70. That's where you want to be.
Yeah, I was just gonna look mine up. So I would say, it depends what exercise you're doing, because if you're doing a fat burning type of workout, I won't see spikes on my glucose.
That's true.
So it's steady. So if I'm not using glucose because I'm a fat adapted athlete, so to speak, you are tapping into your fat stores and your glucose should stay steady. So that's why kind of people are that keto endurance. I hate all these words. That's why I'm doing air quotes, but I think it is, when you're metabolically efficient endurance athlete, you should be, if you're doing a lower maffetone type of heart rate, we call it 180 minus your age is your max aerobic function heart rate, unless you test it. And then you should be more adapt at burning fat for fuel. If you're doing more speed workout intervals that are more glycogen depleting, we might see different scenario. Or if you're doing like a HIIT training or CrossFit, Metcon type of workout, is going to be a different energy source. So that's where you see the differences.
Yeah, exactly. You'll that's a really good point. Like in different like forms of work, like exercise, you'll see like totally different responses, right? As we've discussed, when you do like these heat workouts and anaerobic workouts, you'll see like your glucose levels actually like elevate, and that's not anything that you need to be worried about. When you really kind of like start seeing the potential in CGM usage, it happens like during like these like long endurance workouts, and you'll start seeing kind of like your glucose levels like just going down, and that's when you like really need to start acting.
So the last question is, what are some red flags that we want to watch out for using the monitor, when you'll say, oh, okay, that's, red flag alarm, as a coach looking at it, or an athlete, when they're looking at their info, that might give you info like change what you ate, or change how your day was, or you're reactive to stress. Maybe you need to meditate more and do some nasal breathing. But what are some red flags that you've seen with your users the last couple of years of, when it goes really high and they need to, maybe it's common foods or stressors? Have you seen anything that makes it go, okay, we've got to take some attention on our health?
Yeah. I actually, because all of the meals that are added, they have most of them have a tag, and we've collected like tens of thousands of tags, if not soon hundreds of thousands of tags from our users. And sushi is the worst performing tag that we have in our database. Like,
that's what Angela said. The rice, is it sushi or which part of the sushi?
It's most like it's the rice. It's as well, a lot of restaurants use like additional like sugars and vinegars in the sushi rice. So it has like a really like, it's basically just sugar and very little like protein and like a protein and a piece of fat. So sushi is one of the worst performing tags. French fries is one of the worst performing tags.
But is that the vegetable oil or the potatoes? That's how you have to break it down. Like, okay, which is it?
Yeah. Most likely in this case, it might be a combination. It might be a combination of the two, and it most likely is. But it's going to be interesting as we like populate more of these tags of like, is it actually the vegetable or the French fries? But definitely like a combination. Grapefruits as well, like it's Nutella is as well like a very poor performing tag. Funny enough, salt is the best performing tag.
That's funny.
and sunflower seeds, smoked salmon, boiled eggs, paprika, almond butter, red pepper, are all really well-performing tags, and Greek yogurt, and so on. So these are some of the things that we are seeing. Obviously, as well, like a lot of people have see these like really like strong cortisol spikes, and how cortisol blood sugar levels, and such things as well.
Interesting. So we're out of time, and I know we both have stuff after this. So I'm going to put all the links in the show notes. Anything you want to add? Why don't you just give people the website where they can go to learn more about how it works and how to get started?
Yeah. The website is veri.co, Veri with an I, .co, and we are live on like Android and iOS, and we will provide you a link to the show notes to give a small discount of the product, Debbie. So all of your all of the listeners and people in your community can test out the product for a small discount in the beginning, and so on. But definitely, like the CGMs have taught a lot to me personally. I've learned a ton of this, and I think that, as I said, like it's already like a significant metric, but it's just kind of a tip of the iceberg. And everyone should really have an understanding of how they're responding to different foods and what's the state of their metabolic health from the day that you're born to the day that you kind of like leave this place. And that's that's what I'm advocating to, and that's what we're trying to work on at Veri, to make this technology more accessible and really make very, very simple interface for more broader audience to understand this technology and understand the kind of like everything that we were able to like discuss in an hour, and we could have gone like for 4 more hours talking about these things. We're trying to do all of that for people from all sorts, like walks of life, as easy as possible to access this. So it's a very important topic.
Good. Well, thank you for what you guys are all doing, helping us all be healthy in this world. As we all know, we need more people to be metabolically healthy. And we will try this out. And maybe I can write out some of our studies that we talked about today in the show. Maybe I can put that into a blog and have people try it out, so we can collect some of our own data for the athlete and the female athlete. So thanks so much. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you a lot, Debbie.